In the sprawling, meticulously maintained suburb that lay like a jewel on the outskirts of a bustling American metropolis where every perfectly manicured lawn, every precisely trimmed hedge, and every architecturally harmonious home testified to the uncompromising vigilance of a homeowners association that ruled with an iron fist wrapped in velvet, I found myself a quiet, unassuming resident whose placid exterior belied the turbulent echoes of a past steeped in clandestine operations and covert missions for the FBI, navigating a landscape that was as deceptive in its serene beauty as it was fraught with the undercurrents of unspoken tensions and repressed transgressions. As the late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of oaks and maples lining the pristine streets and cast long, contemplative shadows over the orderly driveways, I became increasingly aware of the omnipresent aura of control that permeated every facet of this community, an aura that was embodied most vividly in the formidable figure of Karen, a woman whose very name had become synonymous with the relentless enforcement of HOA regulations and whose steely gaze and unwavering determination to uphold the sanctity of our shared space left little room for dissent or deviation, as if she were both the guardian and the executioner of a code that demanded perfection at all costs. On that fateful day, while I had parked my modest vehicle, a vessel that, unbeknownst to many, concealed the layers of my secret identity, in a seemingly inconspicuous corner of the communal lot, I sensed the silent scrutiny of my neighbors and, more pointedly, of Karen herself, whose every glance carried a judgment as piercing as a scalpel. And it was then, amidst the gentle hum of suburban normalcy punctuated by the distant murmur of lawnmowers and the soft rustling of leaves, that I overheard a terse exchange between her and a rugged tow truck driver, a man whose grizzled features and guarded demeanor hinted at a shadowy past replete with unsavory dealings and clandestine alliances. His voice, low and gravelly, mingled with Karen's cool, measured tones as she declared, "We maintain order here, and deviation from the rules is simply not tolerated." A statement that resonated within me like the foreboding toll of a bell and stirred within my breast a tumult of conflicted emotions, admiration for her unyielding commitment to a pristine order, mingled with an unspoken dread at the cost such order exacted from those who dared to stray from the narrow confines of acceptable behavior. As I lingered in that charged moment, my mind recalling long-forgotten nights spent navigating the labyrinthine corridors of covert operations and the quiet desperation of lives lived in the shadows of authority, I could not help but reflect on the inherent duality of our existence here, where the outward display of meticulous order masked a deeper, more chaotic undercurrent of suppressed desires and clandestine secrets, a duality that seemed to animate every resident, from the imperious Karen to the taciturn tow truck driver whose eyes betrayed stories of alliances forged in the murky depths of the urban underbelly, and even to me, whose every breath was a delicate balancing act between the life I presented to the world and the dangerous truths I carried within. In that moment of introspection, as the golden light of dusk deepened into a rich tapestry of amber and shadow, I marveled at the paradox of our surroundings, a community built on the promise of safety and order, yet teetering on the brink of an internal rebellion spurred by the relentless imposition of rules that left no space for the unpredictable whims of the human spirit. And I found myself wondering whether the very measures that promised stability might, in their rigid application, sow the seeds of their own undoing, a thought that gnawed at my conscience with the persistence of a well-known specter from my past. Even as I grappled with these turbulent musings, the interplay of light and shadow across the immaculate pavement seemed to underscore the fragility of the facade we maintained. A facade that was at once a shield against chaos and a prison for those whose souls yearned for a freedom that defied the sterile confines of enforced conformity. And it was in this charged atmosphere of quiet rebellion and hidden longing that I began to perceive the true nature of Karen's authority, not merely as a bureaucratic imposition, but as a deeply personal crusade born of her own insecurities and haunted by memories of past transgressions that had compelled her to seek refuge in the certainty of rules and regulations. For behind the steely exterior lay a heart that had once known pain and loss, a heart that had learned, perhaps too late, that the pursuit of absolute order could come at the expense of empathy and understanding. A realization that was as palpable in the furtive glances exchanged among neighbors as it was in the strained silences that followed every pronouncement of non-compliance by the ever-watchful HOA, and as the evening deepened into a serene yet eerie calm, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of discontent and the distant rumble of engines on well-paved roads, I retreated into the quiet solitude of my modest home, a sanctuary that, despite its unremarkable exterior, held within its walls the secrets of my double life and the weight of countless unspoken truths. And in that Sanctuary amidst the soft glow of a single lamp and the rustle of pages from a long-forgotten dossier, I resolved to remain ever vigilant, to observe the subtle shifts in the behavior of those around me, and to decipher the silent signals that might betray an impending rupture in the delicate balance between order and chaos, for I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that the forces at play in our seemingly placid suburb were far more complex and insidious than the mere enforcement of parking regulations or the meticulous maintenance of pristine lawns, and that the unyielding dedication of Karen, the enigmatic presence of the tow truck driver, and even my own hidden past were all intertwined in a narrative that promised to upend the carefully constructed illusion of security and reveal the raw, unfiltered truth of human vulnerability and the inexorable pull of destiny. Thus, as the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to the encroaching darkness of night and the crisp air grew heavy with the promise of unforeseen revelations, I could not shake the conviction that beneath the surface of our idyllic community lay a simmering cauldron of emotions, secrets, and betrayals waiting to erupt, and that the collision of our meticulously ordered lives with the unpredictable forces of fate would soon force each of us to confront the profound, often painful, realities of our own existence. A confrontation that would not only challenge the rigid boundaries of our outward identities but also compel us to question the true nature of justice, freedom, and the sacrifices demanded by a world in which even the most mundane rules could carry the weight of destiny. As the day waned into a cool, anticipatory dusk over the immaculate suburb where every trimmed hedge and polished driveway bore witness to an unyielding commitment to perfection, a sudden ripple of disquiet began to course through the neighborhood when Karen, whose very name had come to symbolize the uncompromising, almost militant enforcement of community rules, caught sight of a car parked in blatant contravention of the strict parking regulations that had long been the bedrock of this carefully curated existence. And although this particular vehicle belonged to a resident whose unassuming exterior belied a life shrouded in secrets and covert affiliations with shadowy governmental operatives, Karen's eyes, ever watchful and unyielding, saw only the stark violation before her and not the hidden complexities lying beneath its surface. With a heart pounding in a measured cadence that mirrored the gravity of the transgression, she advanced with a resolute certainty that had been forged by years of unwavering dedication to order, and without pausing to consider any extenuating circumstances or the possibility that there might be more to the story than a mere lapse in protocol, she reached swiftly for her mobile phone. A device as much a symbol of her authority as the meticulously enforced bylaws she so zealously upheld, and dialed the number of the local towing service with a voice that brooked no dissent, uttering in clear, clipped tones words that were both a declaration of her unassailable jurisdiction and a warning to any who might think to defy the established norms, saying, "This violation will not stand. We must restore order immediately," a statement that, though brief, carried the weight of a verdict passed by a stern magistrate in a society where conformity was prized above all else. Even as the words left her lips, the sound of an engine rumbling in the distance grew steadily louder, its approach heralding the imminent arrival of a tow truck whose presence would soon become the catalyst for a series of events that none could have predicted. For the vehicle's slow, deliberate entry onto the street was accompanied by a hushed murmur among the gathered onlookers, neighbors whose eyes, wide with a blend of curiosity and trepidation, followed every measured movement of the approaching machine as if it were an omen of disruption in an otherwise placid realm. The tow truck, a rugged contraption whose exterior bore the scars and wear of countless previous calls to action, came to a stop with an almost ceremonious finality, its engine idling softly as if taking a moment to gather its own resolve, and from its cab emerged a driver whose face, lined with the hardships of a life spent on the fringes of both legality and necessity, carried an expression that was at once impassive and inscrutable, a silent acknowledgement of the duty he was about to perform. And as he stepped onto the pavement, the crisp sound of his footsteps seemed to punctuate the heavy silence that had fallen over the street, drawing even more attention from residents who, until that moment, had been lost in the rhythms of their evening routines. As the driver approached the offending car with a professionalism honed by years of executing orders without question, Karen, her gaze fixed unblinkingly on the scene unfolding before her, felt a transient yet profound stirring of doubt, a fleeting moment when the unyielding certainty of her convictions wavered beneath the weight of a nascent, almost imperceptible realization that the enforcement of rules, while necessary for maintaining the delicate balance of this perfect facade, might sometimes inadvertently set in motion forces that could undermine the very order she sought to preserve. And in that brief, internal contest of emotion and duty, she almost hesitated. before the inevitable yet the relentless tick of the clock and the mounting scrutiny of the neighbors forced her to steel herself and reaffirm her commitment, for in her eyes any deviation from protocol, no matter how seemingly trivial, had to be met with decisive action. Meanwhile, the tow truck driver, who had now positioned himself strategically beside the vehicle, began the meticulous process of securing it for towing, his movements deliberate and measured, each motion imbued with a sense of finality that resonated with the unspoken promise that this act would restore the sanctity of the communal order. And as he attached the towing apparatus with a practiced efficiency that spoke of countless similar endeavors, a low murmur of approval and anxiety swept through the crowd of onlookers, neighbors who exchanged whispered speculations and furtive glances, their voices carrying a mix of admiration for the swift application of the rules and a quiet, underlying fear that the actions taken in the name of order might carry consequences far beyond a simple breach of parking etiquette. Amid this growing chorus of silent observations, the resident whose vehicle had become the unwitting fulcrum of this unfolding drama watched with a heart gripped by a cocktail of disbelief, mounting dread, and a desperate longing to explain that this was no ordinary violation, though the complexity of his concealed life and the weight of secrets too dangerous to divulge rendered him mute in the face of Karen's unyielding determination. And as he stood hidden behind the modest sanctuary of his home, his mind raced with the implications of the seemingly minor infraction spiraling into an event that threatened to shatter the illusion of tranquility that the neighborhood so painstakingly maintained, even as the tow truck began to move slowly away, its cargo now secured and its engine's low drone serving as a somber counterpoint to the hushed murmur of discontent that had overtaken the street. Karen's figure remained a steadfast sentinel at the window of her pristine residence, her eyes reflecting a mingling of satisfaction at having executed her duty and a subtle, lingering unease about the possible reverberations of this singular act of enforcement, a feeling that was compounded by the charged atmosphere that now enveloped the neighborhood. A veritable crucible of suppressed tensions and unspoken resentments that promised to fester and perhaps even explode in the days to come. In that protracted, almost surreal moment when the mechanical sound of the truck's departure gradually faded into the background and the onlookers began to disperse into the comforting anonymity of their individual lives, the incident lingered like a dark cloud over the suburb, a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of order lay a restless undercurrent of human vulnerability and unpredictable passion. And it was in this charged silence that Karen, still grappling with the internal tumult stirred by her own rigid convictions, allowed herself a fleeting, almost imperceptible sigh, a sound that seemed to encapsulate both the triumph of duty fulfilled and the gnawing apprehension that the enforcement of absolute order, while necessary for preserving the pristine image of the community, might also serve as the harbinger of unforeseen consequences that would soon unravel the delicate tapestry of lives interwoven by rules, secrets, and the inexorable march of fate, leaving behind in its wake a lingering, haunting question about the true cost of maintaining a facade of perfection in a world where even the smallest act of defiance could ignite a conflagration of emotions and expose the hidden, tumultuous heart of human existence. As the tow truck continued its slow, deliberate progress down the quiet suburban street, its engine emitting a low, foreboding hum that resonated with the heartbeat of an unfolding calamity, I, whose secret past and covert operations had attuned me to the subtle, often perilous signals of hidden agendas, found my senses suddenly overwhelmed by an acute awareness that something was terribly amiss in the orchestrated actions of both Karen and the tow truck driver, whose previously unwavering demeanors now betrayed an undercurrent of unease and urgency, as if they were unwitting participants in a larger, more insidious plan. In that moment, as the twilight deepened into a rich tapestry of dusky shadows and uncertain light, I perceived the first unmistakable sign of a betrayal of trust, an imperceptible tremor in Karen's steely gaze and a fleeting hesitation in the tow truck driver's precise, mechanical motions. Signs that urged me to question the apparent simplicity of a routine enforcement of suburban regulations, and almost imperceptibly, a realization began to crystallize in my mind. The car being towed, which had so far been assumed to be the minor transgression of a resident who had strayed from the rigid norms imposed by our homeowners association, was, in fact, no ordinary vehicle at all, but a highly classified FBI asset laden with documents and evidence of staggering importance to a case that extended far beyond the confines of our tranquil neighborhood, a case that had the potential to upend the delicate balance of national security and expose the vulnerabilities of institutions that were meant to safeguard our collective well-being. As this revelation took hold, a maelstrom of emotions surged within me. a potent blend of disbelief, dread, and a deep-seated, almost visceral anxiety that was compounded by memories of my own clandestine missions and the constant, oppressive weight of secrets that could shatter lives with the merest whisper of the truth. And amid the growing silence of stunned onlookers who had, until that fateful moment, been content to let the rigid routines of suburban life define their existence, a sudden flurry of activity erupted as a contingent of FBI agents, clad in dark, somber suits that marked them as emissaries of an authority far removed from our everyday struggles, emerged from the shadows with a swift, almost balletic precision that left no doubt as to the gravity of the situation. Their arrival punctuating the charged atmosphere with commands so terse and resolute that even the soft rustle of leaves seemed to pause in deference to their presence, as one agent, his voice calm yet imbued with an unmistakable note of urgency, intoned, "Secure the vehicle immediately." A directive that not only confirmed the significance of the seized car but also underscored the magnitude of the breach in security that it represented. And as the agents began to methodically cordon off the area, their eyes scanning the scene with an intensity that belied the quiet desperation of a system caught in the throes of an unforeseen crisis, I could see Karen's confident facade begin to crumble ever so slightly, revealing fissures of uncertainty and regret that, though quickly masked by her habitual tense on order, betrayed the emotional toll that such an unexpected turn of events exacted upon her. For she had long prided herself on being the unwavering enforcer of community standards, yet now, faced with the incontrovertible evidence that her actions had unwittingly set in motion a chain reaction of events with repercussions reaching into the highest echelons of national security, she was forced to confront the stark reality that the pursuit of perfection could sometimes serve as a double-edged sword, inflicting wounds far deeper than the mere violation of a parking rule. And the tow truck driver, whose rugged features had so far been etched with the stoicism of one accustomed to the unspoken dangers of a life on the margins, now exchanged a few hushed, almost inaudible words with Karen, a brief dialogue that, though lost in the ambient clamor of the agent's commands and the murmurs of a gathering crowd, resonated with a palpable sense of foreboding and hinted at an internal struggle as he wrestled with the moral implications of his actions and the realization that he, too, was now enmeshed in a web of deceit and high-stakes intrigue that defied the mundane certainties of suburban existence. In that charged, almost surreal atmosphere, every element of the scene, the steady drone of the tow truck's engine, the crisp, determined footsteps of the arriving agents, the fleeting, conflicted expressions that passed momentarily over Karen's face, and even the silent, watchful eyes of the neighbors who had gathered at a cautious distance, coalesced into a single, overwhelming tableau of revelation and impending chaos, a tableau that forced me to reckon with the inescapable truth that the thin veneer of order we had so diligently maintained was about to be irrevocably shattered by the raw, unfiltered force of reality. And as I stood there, my mind reeling with the implications of this extraordinary turn of events, I could not help but be overwhelmed by a sense of tragic inevitability, a feeling that the actions of this single day, marked by the towing of an inconspicuous car that now loomed as a silent harbinger of a far more complex and dangerous reality, would unravel the carefully woven tapestry of lives, secrets, and ambitions that had long defined our community, exposing the frailties of a system that, in its quest for an immaculate order, had unwittingly sown the seeds of its own undoing. Indeed, as the FBI agents proceeded with their meticulous investigation, their presence casting long, somber shadows over the manicured lawns and pristine facades of the houses that now seemed to huddle in anxious silence, I felt a profound and disquieting shift within myself, as though the ground beneath my feet were beginning to tremble with the weight of a truth that could no longer be ignored. A truth that spoke of hidden alliances, long-buried secrets, and a conspiracy that had far greater implications than any of us could have imagined. And it was in that moment of harrowing clarity, as the agents methodically secured the evidence and began to piece together the fragments of a narrative that was as vast and convoluted as it was dangerous, that I realized with a mixture of dread and grim determination that the collision between our seemingly idyllic suburban world and the ruthless, unyielding forces of federal authority was inevitable, a collision that would not only upend the lives of Karen, the tow truck driver, and the unsuspecting residents who had hitherto taken solace in the reassuring predictability of routine, but would also force each of us to confront the stark, unvarnished reality of a world where the pursuit of order, however noble in its intentions, could precipitate a cascade of unforeseen consequences, and as I absorbed the magnitude of the moment, a single lingering thought echoed through my mind. A thought that, despite the chaos and the overwhelming sense of impending doom, offered a sliver of hope that in the unmasking of these long-held secrets, in the inevitable reckoning that now lay before us, there might yet be a chance for redemption, for truth, and for a new beginning that transcended the rigid boundaries of duty and deception. Even as the night descended fully upon our troubled community, cloaking the scene in darkness and uncertainty, and as the agents, Karen, and the tow truck driver became unwilling protagonists in a drama that spanned from the quiet streets of suburbia to the shadowy corridors of power, I, too, felt the inexorable pull of destiny drawing me deeper into a vortex of revelations and reckonings. A vortex that promised to unravel not only the carefully constructed facade of order, but also the very foundations of trust and loyalty upon which we had so long relied, leaving behind in its wake a legacy of shock, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of justice that would forever alter the course of our lives. As the FBI's relentless presence pressed in with the cold finality of inevitability and Karen's once impervious mask of authority finally crumbled beneath the crushing weight of indisputable evidence that her uncompromising zeal had inadvertently transformed a simple parking infraction into a federal crisis, a cascade of immediate, shattering consequences unfurled before the eyes of every resident in our meticulously curated suburban haven. A place that for so long had thrived under the comforting illusion of pristine order and carefully maintained facades, and in that fateful moment, as stern-faced agents methodically secured the now infamous FBI vehicle, an asset whose unassuming exterior belied the seismic secrets it contained, and began a series of rigorous interrogations that left no room for personal bias or the sentimental hesitations of those caught in the crossfire, Karen found herself ensnared in a vortex of accountability and despair, her once resolute voice reduced to a tremulous murmur of half-formed justifications as she attempted to reconcile her lifelong commitment to enforcing community standards with the dawning realization that the rigid boundaries she had so doggedly maintained were now the very chains that would imprison her. And as the tow truck driver, whose tacit complicity in the unwitting theft of this classified asset became increasingly apparent in the grim efficiency of the agent's inquiries, exchanged a few whispered, anxious words with Karen, words that, though barely audible above the mounting tension, betrayed the inner torment of a man who had spent years balancing the scales between duty and personal morality, now forced to confront the chilling possibility that his actions, taken in the spirit of maintaining order, had inadvertently set in motion a chain reaction with consequences far more dire than he could have ever imagined. And as I, the reluctant chronicler of these unfolding events, watched from the periphery with a heart heavy with the burden of secrets and a soul steeped in the shadows of my own clandestine past, I was overwhelmed by a profound internal struggle, a tumultuous blend of regret, fear, and the sobering acknowledgement that the delicate balance between order and chaos was now irrevocably disturbed, for the once comforting rhythm of suburban life had given way to an ominous silence punctuated only by the clipped commands of federal agents and the low, haunting drone of engines as evidence was meticulously collected, and in that charged atmosphere, every meticulously trimmed hedge and every pristine facade became a silent testament to the fragility of our carefully constructed existence, a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of perfection lay a cauldron of suppressed desires, hidden transgressions, and the inexorable pull of destiny that could, with a single fateful act, upend the lives of all who had dared to subscribe to the myth of unassailable order. And even as the agents continued their somber, methodical work, documenting every minute detail, every whispered confession, every fleeting glance of remorse and defiance, the broader implications of that day's events began to crystallize in the collective consciousness of our community, sparking an undercurrent of speculation and dread that hinted at the possibility that the scandalous towing of the FBI car was not merely an isolated incident, but rather the overture to a far more complex symphony of corruption, betrayal, and clandestine alliances that extended well beyond the neatly demarcated boundaries of our suburban enclave, suggesting that the dark networks of criminal enterprise and government subterfuge might have long been intertwined with the very fabric of our lives, a realization that left even the most stoic among us grappling with an unsettling ambiguity about the true nature of power and the cost of absolute order. And as I stood there in the dim, uncertain glow of that fateful evening, my mind awash with memories of covert operations, long-buried regrets, and the crushing inevitable ity of truth. I could not help but feel that this single, explosive convergence of fate, duty, and unintended consequences had irrevocably altered the trajectory of our lives, setting us on a path where the boundaries between right and wrong, loyalty and treachery, were no longer discernible, and where every action, no matter how seemingly insignificant, carried with it the potential to unleash a cascade of repercussions that would echo through the corridors of both our private hearts and the public institutions that had long been revered as bastions of order. And so, as the night deepened and the whispers of disbelief and introspection mingled with the fading hum of departing engines and the methodical shuffling of determined federal agents, I found myself racked with the dual burdens of duty and despair, a tortured awareness that the pursuit of perfection, a pursuit embodied by Karen and enforced with such relentless precision, had, in its blind execution, become the harbinger of an unpredictable, chaotic future, one in which the sanctity of community, the resilience of human spirit, and the elusive quest for justice would all be tested in ways none of us had ever dared to imagine. A future where every suppressed emotion and every unspoken secret would rise to the surface in a reckoning that would not only expose the fragile underpinnings of our once ideal existence, but also compel us to confront the deepest, most painful truths about ourselves and the society we had so long taken for granted. And it is with this heavy, contemplative heart, bearing witness to the collision of duty and destiny, order and anarchy, that I now invite you, dear reader and listener, to join in reflecting on the profound lessons of this tragic saga, to share this video, and subscribe to our channel, so that together we may continue to explore the intricate interplay of human emotions, the staggering consequences of our actions, and the unyielding, often unpredictable march of justice in a world where even the most meticulously enforced rules cannot shield us from the inevitable turbulence of fate.